God, welcome back to Off Topic with Catherine, where stories spill over, lessons get learned, life gets messy, just like kids should. I'm so happy you are here, and if you made it back for episode 2, you are officially part of the chaos now. So grab your coffee, get comfy, and let's talk. Today's story is one that really shaped me. It's a story that happened many years ago, as my previous story did. And it's a story that actually taught me that there's a very distinct difference between belonging and fitting in, which I wasn't sure if there was a difference before, as probably many of us don't really realize until we dig a little bit deeper. Now, I'm going to go back into the late 70s. And in the late 70s, I was raised in a very modest little home in a very vibrant Greek neighborhood where homes were attached to each other. They were not separate homes. It was in a very vibrant neighborhood. A lot happening. Life just kind of rolled into the sidewalks and everybody knew absolutely everybody. We did a lot of porch hopping, which meant in the summer, particularly in the summer months, we would go from one home to the next, one porch to the next, and we just kind of hang out till the wee hours of the morning. Kids were playing in the sidewalk, running. I mean, there was very little supervision, but everybody felt super safe. And we just knew everybody's business. We were involved in everybody's home, in and out, what was happening on a daily basis. Now, my school was probably about a 10-minute walk from my house. And I had my little girlfriends at that time that would come and pick me up, and we'd walk to school together. I started walking alone to school pretty much from when I began school, which was kindergarten. My parents worked and they would leave the house at around 7 a.m. in the morning and get home, I don't know, like 4 or 5 p.m. My mom, my dad much later. We'd have the key tied around our neck and not very safe, but you know, it worked. And we'd get home, open the door, go inside and wait for our parents to come in. Now, my mom was a seamstress, so she made all of my clothes. And I mean, all of my clothes. She kept the leftover fabric from work. And we're talking about the late 70s. So just picture the vibrant colors, the polyester fabric. And life was wonderful. And so this is how I would dress up in my haute couture every day. There was no negotiation, no questions asked. These were my clothes. This is what I wore, and off I went to school. And I was very happy. I felt great. Now, my pants were a very thick polyester because they needed to keep me warm. So it was very interesting because at the end of the evening, every time I would take off my pants, they kind of looked like this sort of mediocre letter W because the creases of the back of my knees would just kind of stand up. That's how thick the fabric was. And my tops were always button shirts because those were easier to make. And if there was not enough of the same pattern to make my shirt, more often than not there was, but there were those rare times there wasn't, my mom would use another pattern for my sleeves, but she'd be really okay with keeping it in a solid color. So my shirt would be this very flamboyant, multicolored, psychedelic pattern, and then my sleeves, if there wasn't enough pattern, would be like a solid, I don't know, lime or fluorescent something, and it was great. My friends would pick me up, we'd walk to school, have our lunch there, very typical dolma or spanakopitaka, and of course, the one and only cheese that existed in the entire world, you guessed it, feta cheese. There was only one cheese. We all know that, right? Cheese for breakfast, cheese for lunch, cheese for dinner. We didn't question what cheese. It was Feta cheese. And that was it. Now, one day, my parents sat my brother and I at the kitchen table and told us that we would be moving to another Canadian city. Like most Greeks did at that time, they needed to find their fortune doing what? Opening up our restaurants. And we had some family in another Canadian city that was constantly encouraging my dad to go there because it was the best place to be, and we'd really love it there and it'd be great and we should give it a chance. And they were very successful, so I was so excited. I mean, of course I'd be leaving my friends and my neighborhood and my home and everything that I knew and I felt comfortable in. But that thrill seeker and free spirit in me, always ready for an adventure into the unknown, took over. And I was just gung-ho ready. My dad and I were. Now, my mom and my brother, on the other hand, were not as thrilled as I was. Even though actually it was my mom's side of the family that would be receiving us back in the other side of the world. She was still hesitant. She just didn't want to go, but we did anyways. So we sold our modest little home. We left our very cozy, safe, familiar, wonderful, little vibrant neighborhood, and we got on a plane and we flew over and landed to a place that was culture shock. Now, for the first couple of days, we lived with my uncle till we settled in and my parents found a place for us to stay. I never even questioned, where are we going to stay? Where am I going to go to school? What am I going to do there? It was never even a thought that crossed my mind. I was just so excited to be leaving and just, exploring some new adventure, thinking I was going, to Mars or something. So we find this new place and my parents said, okay, now let's all go and check out our new home and settle ourselves in. Now, as we're going to this new place of ours, I realize, obviously, that this is not at all what I'm familiar with. This is not at all what I imagined and what I came from, the kind of place I came from. First of all, we moved into an apartment building, a very unusual looking apartment building. It was kind of like a complex. It was a round building. And as soon as you opened the door, there was like absolutely no one there. There was just door after door after door after door. There was a tiny little lobby, and coming from a duplex where everybody was outside and things were happening all the time. It was like, where are the people? I don't know. They were not there. And not only did we move into an apartment building, but we moved to the suburbs. Now, the suburbs in the late 70s were not like the suburbs of today. First of all, in order for us to get to the residential building next to us or house, we needed to walk for a few minutes. And it was kind of a very farm-looking area. I mean, I had never been to the suburbs before this. So clearly I was really surprised to even learn that something like this existed. I had no idea. I'd never been there. And so here we are in suburbia in the 70s in an apartment building far, far, far away from home, where not only did I not know where I landed, but I was surprised that when we landed with the plane that we had left at a certain time and we arrived to this new other city, there was a 3-hour time difference, and I was trying to figure out in my little 10-year-old brain, how is it that it took us 5.5 hours to get there, but we're 3 hours ahead. Anyways, yeah, that was the beginning of it. Now, the next day I had to get myself to school. My parents did not speak any English. I mean, not a word. My dad got up in the wee hours of the morning to start his new job, hopefully land one of his new, projects. And my mom was home. So I was given directions from my uncle how to get myself to my new school. Now, I was in elementary and my brother was in high school, so we'd be going to 2 different schools. And my uncle had said to me, the one that lived there, well, once you get off the building, there's like a path and you're gonna follow that path. And when you reach the end of the path, then you're gonna see your school. He had given me a piece of paper, and on the paper, there were letters. It was not numbers, letters. So here I am, I get myself together, and lo and behold, this path is a dirt road. Thinking back, I felt it took me like hours to get there, but in reality, it was like a 10-minute walk. So I start walking alone on this dirt road, swooshing the trees from one side to the other, because literally it was a dirt road with trees and sort of like a real farmland. And when I get to the end of the dirt road, I'm looking for my school. There's no school to be seen anywhere, at least not the kind of school that I'm familiar with, like my little building with my concrete playground. And, the little signs on the concrete are the little whatever where we played dodgeball and all the sports we used to play during recreation. So I remember seeing an adult. So I see this adult, and I was by myself. Here I'm around 10 years old, and I show him this paper, and I'm telling this person, I need to go to school. And he says to me, oh yeah, this is your school. I said, where is the school? Because all I could see were 3 detached red brick houses. And he said, yes. Well, your school is the 3rd house on your right. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's a house. That's not a school. He says, no, that's your school. So the first schoolhouse was for 1st and 2nd grade. The second schoolhouse was for 3rd and 4th grade. And my schoolhouse was for 5th and 6th grade. So not only did I feel like Little Red Riding Hood walking through the forest, but once I find my school, I felt like Laura Ingalls from Little House on the Prairie. And for those of you who don't know Little House on the Prairie and Laura Ingalls, never mind. I love Laura Ingalls and I love Little House on the Prairie. So I knew how I felt. So I knock on the door, the teacher answers, welcomes me in. And again, it's quite a small a schoolhouse, introduces me to the students, sit down, and lunchtime rolls around. Now, of course, I was very nervous and I didn't know anybody, and I had my little lunchbox. And the way it worked during lunchtime is that we were pre-seated. So all the students had a seating arrangement already given by the teacher. And I think we were about 7 or 8 sitting at each table. So here I am, I sit down with all these 7 other kids that I didn't know who they were. And they're talking away and they're eating their lunch, and I open my little lunch with my dolmadaca and my cheese, of course, with a very particular aroma. And they all opened up their lunch boxes, and most of the kids, if not all, took out this rectangular slice of orange something that was either part of their bread or they removed the cellophane from. And I asked them, what's that? And they said, well, what do you mean? What is that? I said, well, what are you eating? And one of them actually folded it in several times, and it made it into a little cubicle and just plopped it in their mouth. They said, that's Kraft cheese. I said, no, it's not. They said, yes, it's cheese. I said, no, this is cheese. I'm eating cheese. They said, no, this is Kraft cheese. So that was my very first experience, introduction to Kraft cheese. Yes, it was. And so the story goes that every day I would bring in my Feta cheese, and that was the only cheese that I ever knew for the entire time that I was there. And they would have their little bologna and so this and that sandwich, and that's how it was. Now, a couple of days into my school year, I noticed that these kids spoke very funny English. I mean, they didn't speak proper English like my Greek English. Like, I spoke real English. They had this weird accent. Like, I mean, all of them. They didn't sound like me. They sounded very weird. Not only did they speak this funny English, but you know, running shoes, I wore running shoes. Well, they would call running shoes sneakers. Like, what was that? Those aren't sneakers, those are running shoes. But they insisted that they were sneakers. Oh well. Anyways, so here I go. I arrived to school my second day, and I noticed that they're all dressed almost the same. They're wearing a shirt that's either one color or with squares, what we know as plaid shirts. Very boring. And denim pants. They all wore denim pants. I had never worn a pair of denim pants. Certainly not for a long time after. How boring was that? Here I come in with a bang, with my mom's top of the line haute couture. And they're just walking around in this very bland and boring outfit. They all look the same. And they had feathered hair. For those of us who don't know what feathered hair is, well, it was this fancy haircut that you used to get in the 70s if you went to the hairdresser, which I never went. Why? Because my mom would cut my hair. Yes, my mom would say, sit down, it's time for you to get a haircut. Chop, 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 end of story, done. No feather hair for me. And that's the way it was. Now, as time went on, these kids and I, as different as we were, developed the most incredible friendship. And there were boys and there were girls. Now, I could not speak to boys. I was just not allowed. It's not that I couldn't. It's just I was not allowed. So back home, that was very clear. I knew about it, so I didn't speak to boys when my mother was around. I'd speak to boys in school, but I didn't speak to boys when my mother was around because she told me I'm not allowed to speak to boys, except my brother, he was a boy, so that was okay. So I had a lot of little girlfriends, but no friends that were boys. So here I am in this brand new city, suburbia, farmland, where everybody's talking to each other and everybody's going to each other's houses. Yeah, we didn't do that. We did not go to each other's houses. I could go to my cousin's house. My cousins could come to my house. There was no friends, none of this friend thing happening. Absolutely not. So one day, there's a knock on my apartment door, and my mother answers. Now remember, my mom did not speak any English. I mean, maybe hello. I don't even know. Maybe hello. Probably she said hello. And at the door, there's like 4 or 5 kids, and they ask for me. Now, my mom calls me. I don't know what time it was. Obviously, it was after school, and she calls me, and she says, come here, come here, come here. So I see all these kids in the apartment door, and I said, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? I go outside the apartment. I said, what are you guys doing here? And they said, well, we thought, do you want to go to the pawn shop with us? To the what? The pawn shop. What's a pawn shop? I had no idea what a pawn shop was. So when they explained to me what a pawn shop was, I said, oh, no, I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that. I can't go to a pawn shop. And I can't even go out with you guys. So no. Well, why can't you go out with it? Because you're a boy, so I cannot go out with boys. And you're not my cousin, so I cannot go out with you guys because number one, you're not my cousins. Number two, there's boys. I know, goodbye. Don't ever come here again. And I close the door. So my mom turns around and she says to me, who were those Bobby this at the door? Bobby this. I don't want those Bobby this coming around this house again, or else. That, by the way, means she was going to kill me. Bobby this in Greek means gangsters. So my mother was calling my 10-year-old little friends who came to invite me to the pawn shop. She was calling them gangsters. Anyways, the next day I get to school and they come up to me and they said, what happened? I said, nothing happened. You will never come to my house again and ask to go to a pawn shop or anything else because I'm Greek and Greeks don't do that unless you're my cousin. But interestingly enough, these kids, they still stayed my friend. And not only did we stay friends, but we became best of friends. As different as we were from one another, actually me and all of them, it didn't matter. I never felt actually that I needed to fit in. They never asked me to fit in it. They never expected me to fit in. They never questioned why I did not dress the way they did. They never questioned, they questioned why my mom was the way she was. And I said, because she's Greek. And they just accepted that. They accepted me, the whole thing, clothes and all, food and all. And I think we both learned so much from each other. And we didn't stay there for very, very long because, unfortunately, my dad did not meet his fortune there. So we came back to our little Greek world. And I was so sad. I was so sad to leave my friends. I was so sad. I mean, I loved coming back and reuniting with my old friends, and definitely it was very familiar. But what an experience that was. What a world unknown for me that was. And had we not have taken that leap to explore and to just see what was out there, even though it didn't perhaps work the way my dad would have hoped, I learned so much from being there and meeting all those new children and them meeting me, that in fact we continued to correspond with each other for many, many, many years afterwards. And then we just kind of lost touch. I think I was in my probably late teens. I would love to one day reconnect with them, but I don't know how I'd be able to do that. But anyways. So what I learned from that experience was there is a very, very, very big difference from feeling the need and the pressure and the not being you and the having to change in order to not be you, just to fit in. And what happens when we do that? What happens when we change who we are just in order to be accepted by a group of people that we don't feel we are a part of, that doesn't resonate with who we are, who we want to be, and what we believe in. And I think this is why this story is so important to me, and reflecting on it and remembering those particular moments of my life are precious. And there was so much respect that was mutual. Now, again, during that time, I never needed to try to fit in. And even though I didn't have the words to describe what I had learned at that time, the feeling was very, very clear to me. Belonging wasn't about matching. It wasn't about blending or toning myself down. It was just about showing up exactly as I was, and then letting those people who wanted to be around me catch up or just connect. So today's coffee wisdom is this. Just remember that to belong, it means to feel genuinely yourself, no matter who you are with or where you are. It's feeling safe and feeling secure and never feeling that you have to change for anybody or anything. Thank you for sharing in my story today. Thank you for listening to my story today. And next time, we're going to dive into a slightly different direction. I'm going to share a personal story about my biggest fear. What I had always been afraid of ever since I can remember. And how I overcame that and how that changed my life forever. Until then, just remember, everything's a little better when we go off topic.